Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our program today. We're very excited about the person we've got on our show today, and Mr. Ken Meyer. He's the president of Solid Rock Consulting Group, LLC. He is a certified master practitioner with Myers-Briggs, and he's been doing this since 1999. So, Ken, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Fun to be here.
Great. Well, Ken, this is kind of an informal interview with you there about Myers-Briggs.
Okay.
What it's capable of doing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Myers-Briggs and how it's used, and then I've got some other questions we can ask as we walk through this.
Sure. Well, the Myers-Briggs itself, Tom, is a psychological instrument, and I think some people sometimes get too focused on that. It's what the Myers-Briggs finds that can be so pivotal, but technically it's a Class B, as in boy, psychological instrument, which just simply means you've got to have some kind of training to use it. Mm-hmm. What it finds, though, as I said, is the power. It's the most accurate instrument to identify healthy personality ever. It's got strong validity. It has a 90% accuracy rate.
Wow.
Only about 10% of the time when someone takes the Myers-Briggs do we get a false report, and that's really got nothing to do with the instrument. It's just what's happening to the individual at the time.
I see.
And the beauty of this thing is what it finds, as I mentioned a couple times already. It identifies a person's personality type, which is made up of an instinctive preference for certain behaviors. Mm-hmm. And the key word there, the way I look at things, is the word preference. That just means you like something better. It doesn't mean you're always going to do it. It doesn't mean you're going to do it, whatever that behavior is, in an automatic, robotic sense. It is a lot like, and many Myers-Briggs practitioners will use the analogy I'm going to use now. It's a lot like having a preference for your right hand or your left hand. It kind of feels just like that. So, for instance, and here also is the problem. By the way, are you right-handed or left-handed, Tom?
I'm right-handed.
Okay, then you don't want a career probably, or you wouldn't want to be involved in a work setting where you got to use your left hand too much.
No, I wouldn't.
I mean, does that make sense?
That's right, yes.
But you can use your left hand, right?
Oh, I sure can.
You can use, there it is. And it's there so you can use it.
Yeah.
But because you're right-handed, you're not supposed to major in your left hand. So, but in the world of work, that's what people are doing. In fact, it's been estimated by several groups that minimally about 70% of all the workers in the world are working full-time in areas of weakness behaviorally. They're doing the job, but one of the biggest reasons the organization is not more functional or more profitable, I should say, is that most of the people that are working there are working in an area of weakness.
I see.
Many of them are doing a wonderful job, it would seem. Many of them are leading. Many of them are managing. But it could be a lot better if they were in areas of strength, or if at least they knew the difference. So, and the other thing I want to mention before I get going too far here and you start asking questions is that this is not a new idea. And that's the thing that got me so excited about it years ago, is I have a natural love for history. And I realized that we've got historical records going back over 3,000 years, showing us that humans have seen and tried to figure out what I just said, which in essence is that humans have instinctively preferred reasons for using certain behaviors. But we can use all kinds of behaviors. And the ancients just, they did everything they could to figure it out and analyze it, and they would come up with 4 groups. Throughout the millennia, they kept coming up with 4 groups and giving them different titles. And now we know there are 16 groups, 4 within each of the ancients. 4. They were highly accurate. They were really on it. But because of the technology we have today, we now know there are 16 personality types, and everybody is just one type all their life. It doesn't change. But it's powerfully fluid, powerfully adaptive, your type is. We can swoop and we can dart with certain situations, but not with the same degree of ease. And I frequently use this analysis. I mean, you're right-handed. You didn't have any trouble telling me you were right-handed. But the vast majority of people do not know the behaviors that they instinctively prefer, and they go to their grave never knowing.
Wow.
And yet it's a core part of who you are as a human being.
So this is what Myers-Briggs helps to identify about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Very specifically, what it finds is easily identifiable, can be very specific, and can be applied in many, many situations very accurately and very powerful.
How does it work? What do they take, a test or
Yeah, it's not really a test. A test means, something you got to study for, and you're going to pass it, you're going to fail it, and it doesn't mean that at all. It's an indicator. You take a certain battery of questions. Each question has two choices, and depending on the choices, one is not better than the other. The indicator is looking for your choice, and as I alluded to before, it's the most accurate indicator for identifying your instinctive choice.
I see.
And when we identify, and there's basically 8 basic groups of behaviors, and when we identify the ones that you prefer, that's when the power can be released.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cautions is that some people, when they take this thing, they think that, well, okay, here's my personality type, and here's the other 4 behaviors, and I'm going to completely ignore those. And that's not the idea. You've got to use all to be a complete and total human from a behavioral perspective. You've got to use all of the behaviors. You're supposed to. But when you can identify the instinctively preferred ones, in business and industry, certain occupational responsibilities can make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Certain problems that are being encountered can be more easily identified.
Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of where a particular position in a company would cater to a particular personality type?
Well, you're going to find a representative of each of the 16 personality types at every position. But an easy one to talk about is a managerial role. There's all 16 types can manage. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But not with the same degree of ease, not with the same degree of observable behavior. One of the personality types out of the 16 that seems to gravitate to management a lot is what we call the sensing judger. And to really understand that, we'd have to go through the whole rigmarole of what a sensing judger really is. But these are people that instinctively, and that's the key to understand, they have an instinctive imperative, the sensing judger, to focus on the practical objectives, realities of what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
That can be very good unless they're managing someone who is not a sensing judger. And it's not that they can't manage that person, but if that particular person, let's say, happens to be an intuitive feeler, such as I am, it's not that I don't understand what the sensing judger is saying, but there are some times when I don't understand it just because of that difference. Or the intuitive feeler is more concerned with relationships in the managerial role. The sensing judger is not. Now, that's kind of a bold general statement. Yes, the sensing judger would be concerned about relationships, but not nearly with the emphasis that the intuitive feeler would put on it. When the intuitive feeler is managing, they want people to like them.
Mm-hmm.
When the sensing judger is managing, basically they don't care that much. I mean, they do on one hand, but on the other hand, as long as the job gets done the way it's supposed to get done, and the bottom line is there, we're increasing profit. Really, when you get behind the scenes, the sensing judger doesn't care what you think about it.
Okay.
But the intuitive feeler or the sensing feeler really does.
Okay.
So, and that may not be the best example, but that's one quick example.
Sounds good. I've got some questions. I think that'll
where these personality differences can get in the way, and and there's actually ways of coming to decisions and analyzing problems in the world of work where all types can get involved in a very positive way. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ken, how does something like Myers-Briggs help us make the most of human resources?
Well, first it would analyze the personality types of each individual who takes it. And based on that, management or human resource people can get a better idea of the natural tendencies, the natural preferences that person would have. For instance, there might be some situations where someone who's a feeler would have difficulty, or let's say a feeling perceiver, or actually a feeling judger is going to have difficulty making snap decisions when something goes wrong. In a troubleshooting situation, a feeling judger would probably not be the best type of individual to handle that if you are able to make those kind of calls, because sometimes your personnel is representative of who they are. In a troubleshooting situation, I'm just throwing this out as an example, Many times it's the sensing perceiver or the intuitive perceiver that could handle that kind of situation better. And unless you do a Myers-Briggs, you really don't know, which one of your people prefers which. And then you take that potential with the understanding that it's very possible that 70% of your people are working out of type anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very helpful. Very helpful. You've got sales situations where some salespeople don't like to put pressure on others because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And then you've got other situations where a certain personality type is not going to care about that. But they'll have a harder time listening to what the client is really trying to say, what the prospect's really trying to say, because in their own mind, they're seeing the logic of it, but the particular client is not a logical person. They're more of a harmonious person, and they could care less about the logic of it. They want to know how everybody's going to feel about this solution if they bought the product or the service and implemented it.
Mm-hmm.
But the salesman's not hearing that. And other permutations. So, once you understand the instinctive preferences of individuals and the differences that exist, it can be incredibly helpful.
Ken, on that note, how would something like this help a company improve teamwork in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, everybody's got to work together. You don't necessarily have to like everybody that you're working with on a team, but you've got to work together. And one of the things that could be identified are differences that each personality type that's on a particular team would bring to the work. For instance, my personality type, I'm what's known as, I'm INFJ. I'm what's known as I'm a dominant intuit, which means I see things conceptually. So what I could bring to a team environment would be strategizing. Here could be the end result. Here could be multiple options based upon what people are saying. I could be on a team with someone who sees it just the opposite by nature, which would be a sensor, a dominant sensor. And they're going to have more difficult time seeing the end result, but they can tell me in great detail what they think is needed in a practical, objective, realistic way. As a matter of fact, there's a decision-making model based on personality called the Z for zebra, Z method of decision-making. And if I could show you a Z, you could, and I won't try that right now, but it's comprised of 4 parts, which represent the core of personality. So let's say we have various individuals on a work team, and we're trying to solve a problem, we're trying to come to a decision. One of the first things we would want to do is to identify the people on the work team that could see all the details, all the facts that are involved with the problem that we're having. And those typically are what we call sensors, okay? So me being an intuit, I'm not going to lend much to that, because that's the most difficult thing I do, is to see the details. Because I'm so good, if I do say so myself, because I'm a dominant intuit, of seeing concepts. But that would flow next. After we've gathered all the facts, then a potentially intuitive person could take over or take the lead on this work team, helping others to identify, the options, the end result options that all these details could lead to. Mm-hmm. And then there could be some other people on the team who could take a look at those options, take a look at those details and say, well, yeah, that's all great, except this one and this one and this one don't make any logical sense. I mean, you can talk about them until the cows come home, but because of the pro and con and the cause and effect of our reality, we can't get to these options.
Right.
So that can be helpful. And then you can have other people who are dominant feelers, if we have any, let's say on this work team, who could say, well, this is all wonderful, but how's this going to really play out? How is the home office going to feel about this? How is logistics going to feel about this? So what we've done is you've taken the sensors, the intuits, the thinkers, and the feelers, and you've used the best of their instinctive skills to come up with some decisions and some plans that can promote the bottom line.
I see. Okay.
But without knowing the personality types, you're just kind of whistling Dixie.
Mm-hmm.
And typically what you'll have, even when you've got options to do it the other way, you'll have goofballs like me who are dominant intuits trying to make a specific, objective, practical decision, and that's not my skill. See, my skill is someplace else. Now, I can bust my fanny, and I can work really hard to make that happen, and I'll do that, for the good of the order and because I want to earn a living. But I'm working in an area of weakness.
Okay.
Now,
Makes sense.
so if we have a censor, that person should be doing this. That girl should be doing this, not me, frankly. Now, if we don't have a censor, then I got to do the best I can, but at least we know it, see? We know that we don't have the resources to do this, so we got to have a plan B. And the only guy that we've got to do this is this Intuit over here, so let's take that with a grain of salt, which means, among other things, that's why he's so stressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's why maybe some other things that he's trying to do are not getting done because he's working so hard in an area that is not his greatest skill in order to provide us with the details.
Okay.
So, and we allow for that,
Ken, here's another question, right? Hitchhiking on that very concept.
Okay.
How does something like Myers-Briggs serve to enhance the communication process going on between managers, employees, business?
Well, right off the bat, it's like speaking a foreign language, Tom. It's like, if I do speak English, but if I speak English and you speak Russian, and I don't speak any Russian and you don't speak any English, but we've got to work together, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure that out? It would be helpful if I could speak a few words of Russian, or if I could get an interpreter in that speaks Russian. And it would be helpful if you could speak a few words of English, or the interpreter can interpret Russian back to English. And I'm just using that as an example because when you understand personality type, you understand that everybody literally speaks through what's known as their dominant function. And that's huge. And not only is that huge in communication, but that is a reality that some salespeople have used for generations.
Mm-hmm.
Many times in a sales situation, I know some salespeople, especially in the industrial arena, are trained to take on the body language of the buyer or the person they're trying to sell. Well, the reason they're doing that is the person, it's called mirror image psychology. The person they're trying to impress, when they see a mirror image of themselves, not only physically, but psychologically, actually starts to like that other person because they're seeing a mirror image of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So when I understand personality type, and I know that I'm not really good with details, but I have a really good idea, or I know for sure that you are, and that's what you want to hear, I'm going to do the best job I can to give you the details first so that you feel not only comfortable, because I'm not trying to manipulate you negatively, I'm trying to get as much communication in my message to you as I possibly can. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to work really hard to give you the details because you're a sensor. And I can use that. So it's a huge communication piece. Okay. For instance, my wife, Carol, is a dominant sensor. Well, that represents my inferior function, as I mentioned. So when I'm really talking to Carol, I try to lead with the details of how this is going to play out first. Or I'll ask her, based on a concept that I presented, to give me the details that she sees. So she's talking in a language that's natural for her, and she's trying to get that across, and I need those details because I'm lacking in that. So knowledge of personality type can help by not only using it as a technique to literally talk to other people, but to understand the natural differences that exist. Mm-hmm. Okay? And typically what you're going to happen, what you're going to see is when the intuit is talking to the sensor or the thinker is talking to the feeler, when you understand those two functional behaviors or those four functional behaviors, those are the behaviors that people are going to be dominant in. They're going to be dominant in one of those four. And when you're dealing with an opposite, you're going to have to repeat yourself 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times. And when you start doing that, people get irritated. I mean, how many times have you had to repeat yourself without getting irritated? I mean, be honest. So if I know ahead of time, though, that that's the environment I'm going to be in, I can get ready for it.
Right.
He's not understanding me, not because he's an idiot or because I'm stupid or he's stupid or there's anything wrong with him. He's just instinctively and behaviorally different than I am. But I've got to work with the girl. I've got to work with the guy because we're on the same team. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So taking that one step further, Ken, so how does Myers-Briggs help with resolving or preventing conflict?
Well, very, very similar to that. If I understand, how another person prefers to make a decision, and I can take that into consideration, and many times that will disarm certain situations. For instance, on a work team, there's some personality types that in an area of conflict, they'll hesitate with confrontation. Other personality types will jump right in, and they're not too concerned about how you feel about it. They're concerned about what needs to get done right now in this moment of time. And both of those approaches are valid, see, but they won't work at the same time. So it's all about, Tom, an understanding of the instinctive differences that exist between people. And there's really not an expectation that anybody can be perfect at this, but the vast majority of people go through their lives, as I mentioned, in business and industry and other places, never knowing that it even exists. So, you know, it can diffuse conflict. It can help solve problems. It can help two people sell things to people. It can help in management and supervision. It can help a human resource department do a better idea of how to better use their resources. It can explain absenteeism. It can explain personal conflicts, all kinds of things.
Okay, that's excellent.
If that answered your question.
Excellent. Let me go to one last point here, as I see we're running out of time. How would Myers-Briggs work with an organization to help them develop skills in creativity, time management, and stress management? Well,
several answers to that question. Time management, first of all, I don't remember your type, you don't need to tell me, but half the world prefers what we call judging. That's a behavior that is very much focused on getting things done in a timely way. Judges need order. Judges need procedure. They're better with rules, timelines, process, to-do lists, I could go on and on. Half the world, according to the statisticians, are what we call perceivers. They're not judges. And they're psychologically hardwired just to wait and see what's going to happen. So these people don't embrace time and time management tools nearly as well as the judger would. Now, they can use them. They can adapt to them, but they're working harder. Perceivers, however, make the best troubleshooters. So, you know, if I can identify that some of the people on my team and on my group are perceivers and some aren't, I can work with the perceivers to understand when we have to be more aware of the timeline. You know, there's certain shipping timelines. There's certain production timelines. You know, some things are going to be run out at a certain time, and we can't wait until the last minute, which the perceivers are the best at, and the judges are the worst at. So many times when you take those things into consideration, that can help in the area of time management. And I forgot the other two areas that you mentioned.
Well, the other two, let's see if I got a list. So it would be in the areas of time management, creativity, and stress management.
Right, creativity and stress management. Well, everybody's going to get stressed. When you understand dominant function, you can automatically understand inferior function, which is where the stressors come. We don't really have enough time to go into it, but when people are overly stressed, you cross a line technically and behaviorally called the gripped. You actually become gripped by your inferior function. That can be identified, that can be shown, that can be defined. People can be prepared to look for that. It's not necessarily a negative thing. It's kind of like a vent, but boy, you really can see when it's happening. And the problem is that most people are working in areas of their inferior function. That's the problem.
I see.
It relates directly to 70% of the workforce working in areas of weakness, and nobody's aware of it. So once you become aware of this, you can do a better job of diffusing stress, identifying where the stress is coming from, and things of those nature. Everybody's creative. Some of the personality types are instinctively born, if you will, with more creative tendencies than others. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But again, a knowledge of type, the potential is to have a very positive impact in all those areas.
Okay, great. I know we could go on with this, and we'll do another program in the future. But in the meantime, if our listeners or our viewers would like to get in touch with you, get in contact you, how can they reach you?
Two ways. My phone number and my email address. They can reach me at the email would be solidrockklm @gmail.com, and I'd be happy to give you my phone number.
Yes.
Okay. 734-790-8695.
Could you repeat that one more time?
734-790-8695.
Great. Ken, I want to thank you so much for being on our program today. I know that these ideas are something that our listeners can really put to practice, so we look forward to our next interview with you in the future. Thank you.
Well, Tom, thanks for having me today. You have a good evening.